guys, happy Wednesday and welcome again to the Actors Vow podcast. Today is the second episode of the Actors Vow season 2 and we have our first guest of the season. I am so excited for this guest. Him and I met this summer in the British Academy of Stage and Screen Combat workshop, but this interview has been coming for almost 2 years, which we will talk about in 1 minute. Our guest today is Rob Myles. He's an actor, writer, director, stage combat teacher, and an all-around artist who does a lot of different things. But today he's here to talk about his new book, Innovation in Digital Theater, and also to talk about Shakespeare. No, do not go away. I see you. I know what you're thinking. Even if you don't know Shakespeare, even if you're not interested in Shakespeare, even if you're like, I would never do Shakespeare, that is not my thing, I need you to stay here. I need you to take a notebook and take notes because I am telling you right now, this episode is for you and it's going to be very relevant no matter what you do, no matter what kind of actor you want to be. Rob is such a fun human being. He is full of golden nuggets. He has spoken at Harvard University, NYU London, East 15, and many more colleges. His story is very inspiring and you cannot miss it. So I'm not going to make you wait more. Let's welcome Robert Myles to the Actors Vow podcast. Hi, Rob. I'm so excited to welcome you as the first guest of season 2 of the Actors Vow podcast. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I feel honoured to be your first guest for season 2. That's very exciting. Yeah, great to be here.
Yeah, well, I have to say, this interview has been in the making for like 2 years.
Yes, of course.
The story behind this, and you know, I'm going to throw you under the bus here, is during the pandemic, when the podcast started, I messaged Rob on Instagram, and he just never answered me. He ghosted me. I was like, he doesn't want to come on the podcast. This is embarrassing. You know,
I wholeheartedly apologise for that.
Go to my corner.
I think as your listeners totally will discover through the course of our conversation, there were good reasons at the time. I was actually one of the few people that was probably busier than most when you first got in touch. And also I'm just terrible at social media, which people might not believe. But I didn't realise there was a requests section to the Instagram message thing. So I genuinely came across it like 2 years later and I was like, oh, this sounds cool.
You're forgiven. It all happened because this summer you and I met in person. In London when I was at the stage combat workshop and Rob was there, and then Taylor, who was the person who introduced us the first time, even who was here in the podcast actually on season 1.
Yes,
he was like, that's Rob. I told you about him for the podcast, and I was like, oh wow, yeah, that is him. I did message him, and it was great. Meeting you in person was awesome. So thank you for being here.
Oh, not at all, mate. It's an absolute pleasure.
So the first question that I ask everybody that comes to the podcast always is, what made you want to be an actor? So I wanted to hear your story.
Sure, yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it feels like it was always on the cards, so to speak. So some of my earliest memories, my mum used to own a small kind of shop. We essentially put a shop front in the front of our house, and she sold kids' clothes. So from being very, very young, like kind of 3-4 years old, she would get me to model in fashion shows that she would put on with kids from the local community, and we would go out there and we would model the clothes that she was then selling out of the shop. And there'd be like little choreographed numbers and things of this nature. And I remember there's one distinct memory that I have of correcting other people on their blocking. At like 4 years old, okay. Just being like, no, you pick that teddy bear and then you walk over there. Like, genuinely, and this is 4 years old, and I think somebody at nursery said he's gonna be the Prime Minister or he's gonna be an actor. And I'm very glad to report that I'm the latter and not the former, because that seems like a thankless task even for someone that's equipped to do it. But yeah, so it was always on the cards. There's a panto that I was in at primary school where I was cast as Robin Hood because of my enthusiasm for swashbuckling, which also has a lot of foreshadowing in it. So it does feel like most of the pieces were in place. It was just me as an adult rediscovering all of these things once I had the agency to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. But in the middle, there was a big gap. At secondary school, there was no drama course. That I was able to participate in, but there was a YMCA youth program that I come from an area that had some social problems, shall we say. So it was there to keep kids out of trouble, essentially. And so I joined that, and it had a real emphasis on physical theatre. And then we ended up taking a physical theatre piece to Prague Youth Theatre Festival. And so all of a sudden I was like travelling internationally and like touring theatre. And I was like 14, 15 probably at this time. I was like, I can't believe that this is a thing that happens.
Wow.
And so that was a big tick box.
Amazing.
Then I got cast as one of the leads in a really like micro budget independent film when I was about 16, and then I just had to drop it completely because I ended up going to university to do a quote unquote real degree.
Wait,
I didn't
also
know at
you
this
didn't
time.
go to school for acting?
No, didn't go to drama school. Did not know that drama school existed until I got back to the UK after I'd graduated university, lived in Japan for a year, studied martial arts, and ended up getting into stage combat actually over there with a guy called Tetsuro Shimaguchi, who choreographed the final fight in Kill Bill between Lucy Liu and Uma Thurman. And because I got in a karate fight and the guy collapsed half my throat, and I was like, I've just had an epiphany as my throat
like
caves
a real fight?
Yeah. So like, well, it's like sparring, full contact, no pads, very, hardcore Japanese kind of way of doing it. And the guy that I was fighting had long sleeves on all the way down to here, which suggests that he had tattoos underneath, which also suggests that he might have been like a Yakuza or something, I don't know. But he just came in one week and they were like, you will fight him today. And I was like, okay, cool. And it was at that moment when I hit the deck after having my throat crushed that I was like, I want to pretend to do this. I don't actually have much enthusiasm for the reality of getting kicked in the head a bunch. And so that's when I ended up finding this guy. Yeah, exactly, yeah. So that's when I ended up finding this guy. And that was my first stage combat experience, and my first experience really of trying to do acting or a performance medium at least. As an adult, really. I'd only ever done it as a kid. And then that kind of meant that I caught the bug again. Came back to the UK, straight into the middle of the 2007 and 8 financial meltdown. So there were no jobs. So it was like, well, if you're going to be broke anyway, you may as well try and do the thing that you want to do.
Might as well be an actor.
Exactly, yeah. So I just kind of took the long way round to find myself at the same place that I started, really.
That's awesome. And for you, when you started, you said you did all that as a teenager, and so was it like just fun, or was it something that, theater gave you that you didn't find somewhere else, that, surprised you or kind of changed your life in some way?
Great question. I think what it gave me was I've always been a storyteller. I think that's the thing that I've been obsessed with and hooked into, and I've kind of made all the jobs that I've ever done, the kind of portfolio career and the stuff that you're doing outside of acting and all the rest of it. It's always been linked in some way back to storytelling, and I think theatre is the most immediate form of that, and the relationship with the audience that you can get from that. The fact it's completely unmediated, it's just me and you and the whites of our eyes and that human connection and empathy. I think just the immediacy of that is the thing that makes it the most addictive of all the storytelling forms that I'm involved in, I suppose. I think probably the most... The dividing path, right, where you could have gone one way or the other, I think came after I got back and there were no jobs around. I actually, and I can't believe this considering the person that I am now, probably largely as a result of being in theatre, but the person I was then was like, do I serve others or do I serve myself? Do I indulge my want to be an actor, or do I try and make myself of use to people? And the way that I thought that I could be of use to people at that time was to become a police officer, which I am trying to say without laughing now, because it's just so not the vibe anymore. But I was actually in the middle of applying, and I was doing an internship.
I can see that with the stage combat and all that. I can see that.
But again, it's the pretend versus real. I already knew at that point that I was allergic to being around violence, and I don't like. I'm sorry to say, as an English person, but I don't like football. I've never liked being around football because it's way too aggressive. And so the notion of me going and getting hold of football hooligans and being like, no, just be preposterous. But anyway, so I was in the middle of applying. And I was at the time I was doing an internship with a charity, and I was doing all their media stuff, communications and stuff like that. As kind of a copywriter, kind of just chucking stuff together for YouTube and PowerPoints and stuff like that. And then they said, we've got the opportunity for you to go to Kashmir and make a documentary on the Kashmir earthquake, in order to help us raise funds to create a health centre that we're going to drop into the middle of Kashmir, which is disputed territory, and it's underserved by both the Indian and Pakistani governments, because neither of them want to invest in it for fear that if the other side wins it, then they've lost that money. And so it was a whole complicated situation. But essentially, they weren't getting the healthcare they needed, and it was like, if we can tell their story, we can help get the money to get them the healthcare they need. Do you want to do that? And I was like, oh, hang on a second. The debate was serve myself or serve other people. And what you're saying is I can serve other people and go to Kashmir and go on an adventure. And like, yeah, okay, great. There we go. That has solved the problem that I thought I had. And so from that point on, it was completely about storytelling henceforth, really.
I love this story. And also, I think it's funny that you brought up the idea that a lot of people like kind of question, right? Like, a lot of people don't see how theater or acting does inherently serve other people already. I mean, in your story even more, right? But just in general, like even through the pandemic, right, where everybody was like at their home, like what were people doing? They were watching TV and movies and any sort of art, and that's what saved a lot of people from going crazy at their houses, right? So with the stories that we tell, we serve people. So not only you became an actor, you also specialize or have done a lot of Shakespeare. Can you tell us where that came about and where you started with Shakespeare and, you know, all that?
Yeah, sure. So I think, again, it started, I guess, from a selfish place, and then it kind of evolved from that into being of service to other people again, in a weird way. That seems to be recurring. Yeah, seems to be a recurring theme. But I feel like I'm literally just connecting these dots now as we're talking about it. But it started with all the actors that are the good British actors, so Ian McKellen, Patrick Stewart, all those kind of people, Judi Dench, right, are all people that are good at Shakespeare. And, you know, I've since had opportunity to talk to Patterson Joseph, Adjo Arando, a bunch of different people like that, and all of them are good at Shakespeare. And I'm just like, okay, so good actors are good at Shakespeare, so I need to go and get good at Shakespeare, and then I'll be a good actor. And I think that logic primarily came from not really being a part of a drama school tradition, right? Where you had the kind of Stanislavski and the more and Meisner and all that kind of stuff, which I've since obviously managed to glom onto in various forms. But I think for me it was just, what is the dot that connects all the people that I seek to emulate, and the thread that connected them all was Shakespeare. Fast forward like 15 years, and that's basically all I've been doing. It just sent me down this rabbit hole. I was just consuming as much information as I could, and I kind of read a load of books on the subject from different authors, all the kind of classics, Peter Hall, John Barton, Patsy Rodenberg, Giles Block, all of these kind of people that have written books on Shakespeare and Shakespeare and voice and Shakespeare and movement. And there's a great book called Brawl Ridiculous about Shakespeare and fights. So like, whatever you want, the great thing about Shakespeare is that whatever you want to find out more about, the resource exists already. Like, because it's been constantly examined for 400 years, if you want help, it's available to find. And so it got to the point where I ended up doing a short course in Shakespeare at Lambda, and I was really disappointed with the quality of the teaching that I was getting, because I'd already read all these things, and I was like, but this person says this and this person says that, what about this, and blah, blah, blah. And the director that we were working with was kind of like, it needs to be more and like that was the level that we were getting. And I was like, okay, so now I'm in like one of the nation's top drama schools that I specifically came to get the information that I can't get anywhere else, and it turns out that it isn't here. So then, to his credit, John Bashford, who was the head of Lambda at the time, may still be, kind of took me aside, again, mentors taking you under the wing, and said, now these books are out of print, but you can find them online, and you should look at these. And so then suddenly the whole process of detective work begins again. And it got to the point where the stack of books that I had was, as tall as I am. And you can't take all of those into rehearsal. So then I was like, okay, how do I distill all of this information down so that it's more useful for me, just practically, first and foremost, but then if it is useful to me, it'll probably be useful to other actors as well. And from that process was born the Shakespeare deck. Which was my first big, I guess, contribution, you know, my rock on the pile of progress in this field, in which I just tried to distill all the most useful information that I found from all of the different sources and put it into its minimum viable form. So the densest, most information-rich, but waffle-free version that I could think of. And the best way to do that, it felt to me, was a pack of cards, because then it's small enough for it to fit in your pocket, but you can get all of the information on the front face and the back face. So the front face has a definition of the thing, the concept that Shakespeare's using, with examples from the text. And then the backside has what you can do with that and how you can find it when you're looking for it out in the wild, so to speak, when you're doing your own Shakespearean stuff. And so the whole thing...
That's fascinating.
Goes along those kind of things, along those kind of lines. So you've got 4 faces, you've got you've got forensic linguistics, rhetoric, working the text and engaging the audience. So it uses a very outside-in way of looking at it, where you go from the micro of like individual syllables right out to the macro of like how are we all interacting together, not just cast in between ourselves, but then with the audience as well, so that we're all having this kind of collective shared experience.
That's fascinating. And so this deck, is this something that actors use in rehearsal, or is this something that if, somebody's listening and they're like, I've never done Shakespeare, but I would love to learn how to perform Shakespeare, would that be useful to them too?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's useful for people of all levels. What I've done, especially because it's in its 2nd edition now, and in the 2nd edition I did go through and further clarify a number of things that I maybe had made assumptions about because of the level that I got to. I was kind of like, well, everybody kind of knows what this is. And then I went back again and I was like, no, everybody doesn't. So like, let's really be specific and clear about what we mean when we say iambic pentameter, for instance. So it will certainly work for someone that's never come to it before. But equally, I do have veteran actors that have it in their toolkit, so that then if the director's working on another scene and you're sat in the corner and you're like, well, how can I be using this time in rehearsal productively? You can bash it out and you can just work on it to find some discoveries. Really, that's what it's about, is unlocking creative opportunities in the text that are there to be seized upon, but doing so in sympathy with what is there on the page, rather than imposing ideas onto it without taking care for what has already been put into it that's designed to make it easier for the actor. But when you do that, you can come at it in cross purposes, and therefore the interpretations that you make might ring false to the audience, because what you're saying and what you're doing might not necessarily be in concert with each other, right? Where if you're starting from the text and then you're discovering all these opportunities in there, the great thing about it is that the opportunities are what I would call agnostic. So the opportunity isn't there to tell you, you have to play it this way. It's just telling you there's a change here. There's contrast between this bit and this bit. And in order to get that out, you could do it in this way or that way.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think of a little pocket acting coach or director, right? Because that's what they do. They like give you all these options. And ideally, if they're good directors, they give you the freedom to play with all the possibilities. But that's awesome. I can see how this could be very helpful for people who are auditioning for acting school. A lot of acting schools require, a Shakespeare monologue. And if you've never done it, that can be very daunting. Can you tell us, because a lot of the listeners are young audience, a lot of them might have never read or seen Shakespeare. How is Shakespeare still relevant nowadays, right? Because I can see how a lot of young actors can think, well, this is from so long ago, I don't even understand what these lines say. Why are still people doing this? Why are we talking about this?
Yeah, okay, yeah, no, I'll pick up that gauntlet. Some of the common talking points are 95% of the words that Shakespeare uses are still in common usage today. So only 5% of the words in the whole 36 plays are words that we would need to check in a dictionary, for instance, in order to understand them. Okay. The difference is that the order of the words has been shuffled around in order to fit this rhythm that it's been written into. And that rhythm can intimidate people, but I think that's only because they think that rhythm is there to impose something on them. Whereas in fact it was a facilitative device. It was there to assist actors in the rapid understanding of what it is they're saying and the rapid learning of it. Because when you're memorizing text, if it has this rhythm to it, then you're better able to get the lines into your head and flow them back out again. And if you're like Shakespeare's actors would have been versed in, to use a terrible pun, the kind of rhetorical devices and things that he's using, you are able to just scan the lines and go, oh, I can see that's one of them, that goes there, that's cool. Oh, cool, great. And very quickly, you've made sense of what it is that the person's saying and what the journey of the thoughts are and all the rest of it. So once you can get to a fluid place with understanding that stuff, it becomes much easier. But why is it still relevant? Well, universalizing abstraction is something that Shakespeare had to use at the time to get around the censor. So there was no free speech. Everything had to be royally appointed and approved, and it had to affirm the status quo of the time. And because of that, Shakespeare had to take really hotbed, tense political issues of his day and put them in a time and place that was remote and exotic and distant, so that if there were any parallels, that would be a coincidence, shall we say, or at least it would be plausibly deniable. So as a result of that,
right,
by taking the situations of his day and going, actually, these apply in ancient Rome as well, or these apply in Venice, or these apply in Verona, or whatever else, by taking that strategy of abstracting it, it became so much more universal to our own time and every time thereafter. Because what he's trying to do is drill down into what makes people people. And once you look at the plays from a place of what are the people's needs in these plays, and how are they going about trying to get those needs, and how do they succeed or fail, and what does that tell us about people in general? If you look at it through that lens, then the relevance of those texts becomes very, very immediate and very, very apparent. And I think one of the reasons that people don't feel that way necessarily is that since at least the Victorian era, David Garrick, the Astor Place riots, things of this nature, Shakespeare was kind of co-opted as a tool of cultural imperialism. So the British Empire was waning, they were trying to assert their power across the world, and they were like, we have the best writer. This is the best writer, his writing is the best, shut up, don't try and do your own writing, our writing is better, etc. And there was this whole agenda that was made to kind of deify and put Shakespeare on a pedestal. And everybody started to say the lines in clipped RP like this. And it was all signalling, this is for the ruling class. This is high art. This is something that is meant for an elite group of people that are clever enough, that are intelligent enough to understand what's being said, because it's poetry, because it's literature, right? And all this agenda started getting established, and it's still with us today. You know, Julian Fellows, the guy that wrote Downton Abbey, decided that he was going to rewrite Romeo and Juliet so the poors could understand it, because he has an expensive education, but we don't, so we can't get it as written. And that drives me around the bend, and it's symptomatic of the fundamental problem that I think Shakespeare today faces, which is for so long it's been co-opted by this small group saying, using it as a tool to say we're the best, that the rest of us now need to take it back and say, actually, no, that's not what it's saying. And if you look at Shakespeare's exploration of power in particular through his plays, and his exploration of the, shall we say, the flaws and caprice and just tragic up their own arseness, shall we say, of the ruling classes within those plays. You know, I can't think of... maybe Henry V is the one king that gets a decent rep out of a Shakespeare play. And like all the others, universally terrible. And so, you know, if Shakespeare was really trying to make the point that people have been using him to make, then he would have written very different plays as a result.
No, I love it. I had no idea about the whole imperialism and how there was like some sort of agenda. I did not know, but I do love Shakespeare and I love the universality of it. And I've seen, you know, the contemporary productions that do another take and then more classic ones. And it's what you're saying. Like, you can see these plays 100 times and every time they can be interpreted in a different way. And they're still going to be relatable, although they were written so long ago. And that's what I think makes it fascinating. But I think that goes for any art, right? Not just Shakespeare. Like anything that is relatable, stands the test of time, and that you can understand, even if you don't understand the specifics of the story, but you relate to the character.
Yeah, 100% it does. And I think as an actor, if you're looking for like resistance training, like if you think about my job is to move an audience, right? My job is to make an audience feel. If you can do that with Shakespearean text in the context of a Shakespearean play, doing it in a contemporary piece of new writing should feel, I don't want to say easier by comparison, but the toolbox that you can bring to bear on a contemporary piece will be so much richer for the effort that you've taken to be able to make Shakespeare clear and understandable to a modern audience, because it can be done, but I think too often productions rely on the idea that audiences aren't supposed to understand it, whereas what should be happening is that the actors are like imagine a gymnast is doing like a triple backflip. And to us on the outside, it looks graceful and effortless and beautiful, and the aesthetic of it is amazing. But for that gymnast, they're pulling like 5-6 Gs, and it feels like they're in the middle of a car crash, right? And then they just happen to land on their feet at the end. So the subjective experience of the person doing the thing is radically different to the experience of the person witnessing and marvelling at the thing. And I kind of think that about when you perform in Shakespeare. The actor is undergoing this incredibly intense physical and mental process to do the work of relating this text to you in a way that you can just sit back and understand it without any effort, because the actor has put all that effort in for you, and it's just knowing how to apply that effort, I suppose.
And it does depend a lot on the actor. I just recently saw Macbeth at the Globe, and we're not gonna get too much into it because it's not necessary, but I honestly, there were moments in which they were just talking, and I was like, I have no idea what is being said. And I've read the play, I've seen the play before, I know exactly what the play is about, but I was so lost at some points. And then there's actors, I don't know if you've seen this, but he played Moriarty in Sherlock, which I love that show. I think his name is Andrew Scott. And he did Hamlet, and oh my gosh, when I see that, like, those words that we've all heard so many times, and I was like, oh, he gives different meaning to them, and you understand everything he's saying, and he just makes it so specific and real, and it sounds like he's talking contemporary language, right? Like, it's not even Shakespeare the way he performs it, and it's so easy for the audiences to understand that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Andrew Scott in that production, I think, set the tone as we're not doing a Shakespeare play, we're just doing a play, and all of those rules don't apply. But what I would caution with that is Andrew Scott can do that because he knows what rules he's breaking. Whereas if you try and approach Shakespeare from that place to begin with no knowledge of what is there, then you can go off on a pretty hard tangent and not realise that that's what you're doing. So yeah, I think it's one of those things for actors to beware the master that makes it look easy, because the process that they went on to get to that place can be quite something. Yeah.
So you kind of answered my next question, but are there any other things that you think actors would benefit from doing Shakespeare? Like, somebody is like, well, I want to be a film, TV actor. Like, why should I study Shakespeare? Are there any things that you think that you could learn out of it, that although maybe you won't be a professional Shakespeare actor, it will really help you in your career?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, memorization of text, you're not going to get more to memorize probably than if you're doing a Shakespeare text. So it's useful in that way. I think it just that real critical, engaging your critical faculties thing. I think there's a thing Simon Russell Beale says. He says that acting is three-dimensional literary criticism, because we're reading the thing, we're trying to understand the thing, and then we're interpreting the thing, and then we present you with that interpretation. And I think that is a challenge. Yeah, but it's a challenging thing to do for any piece of text, but it's more challenging to do with Shakespeare. And I think by grappling with Shakespeare and trying to get to a point where you can do it with that, doing it with other things will almost always be more straightforward. The way Shakespeare forces you to use your voice, so your cadence, your emphasis, your timing, all of that stuff, all the vocal range, all the different vocal qualities, in order to convey sense to the audience, which is not something that we ever really think about when we're doing new writing. That is an incredibly useful skill then, so that when there isn't necessarily the barrier for sense, you can use all of those tools, but to get across different things. But you found those tools and you opened up your ability to work effectively with those tools by working with something that demanded that of you. So that then when there's something that doesn't demand it of you, it's a wonderful added optional extra that you can bring, which is a whole other layer to your work that someone that's not gone through that process might not necessarily be conscious of enough to be able to do. I think in terms of advantages to actors of doing Shakespeare, I think you will never play bigger emotions and stakes. So, like filmmakers will tell you, everything lives or dies by stakes. If the stakes are low, if the thing doesn't matter to the character, what am I watching it for? And in Shakespeare, everything matters desperately and urgently to everyone. Everything is important that happens. And sometimes it doesn't seem that way because like someone will have a huge, long, 3-page piece of text where they're talking on their own to the audience. And you're like, well, how can that be urgent? How can that matter? But it's the process of making it high stakes and making the debate, the argument that they're having really vital and really vibrant that brings it to life. And again, if you get used to hunting for what are the stakes in this, what are the needs in this, what are the obstacles in this, all of the stuff that you would need to do for regular acting, you need to do exponentially for Shakespeare. And so really the short answer is it's resistance training for actors. It's lift this incredibly heavy weight, do this 300-pound squat, and then when you're doing them without weights, they feel really easy and you can jump really high. It's a workout for sure. It's a workout.
I want to talk about your book now, which is all related in some way, because I'm guessing the book came about because during the pandemic you were doing a very fascinating project that was called The Show Must Go Online, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And you had like 500 actors and you did 36 first folio plays, and I was reading about the numbers. I was like, there's no way. Like, how did this happen? How did you make it happen? How did you do it? Please tell us, what were the challenges? This is crazy. How did you come up with that?
Great questions. In terms of how I came up with it, it had been an idea that was knocking around in the back of my mind for a while, but a lot of the full story of this can be found in the book, Innovation in Digital Theatre, forthcoming with Routledge on December 4th. But for the summary version, it was an idea that I've been knocking around for a while and had tried to kind of get moving unsuccessfully. There was a guy, a friend of mine called John Lebillen, who had done a reading group that went through each of the first folio plays, but just sitting around a table and reading them out loud, not performing them. And I was like, well, if this can be done as readings, it can be done as performances. Like, there's no reason that we can't just throw that bit of extra, oomph behind it and try and get them all fully done. And so then the pandemic starts, and this is somewhere, in the back of my mind from a couple of years previous, and I saw it sweeping through Europe, and by about the time that it got to Italy, I was like, this is coming. And I think maybe the next day or something like that, I lost a job because someone one of the clients had come down with COVID and was one of like the first people inside the UK to come down with COVID. And so it was like, well, because we don't know what's going to happen, we're just going to postpone it indefinitely. And that was about a week before lockdown officially began in the UK. But at that time, once I'd lost that job, I went on Twitter and 3 other friends of mine had lost gigs on the same day. And I was like, it's here. That's it. It's happened. Like, the avalanche has come in. Yeah. We need to ski out ahead of it or we're going to get crushed. And so I put this idea out and I just said, listen, everybody, I've got this idea to do Shakespeare readings online.
3 days after?
So this is like the same day that I lost the job. I think it was the same day or maybe the day after. I was just like, I've had this idea. Let's do them online. It's a way for us all to keep busy while all this craziness is happening. And then the actual lockdown in England commenced, or rather the theatres were all shut down the day before our first show went live. So we had got the cast together, rehearsed it, edited the text, done all the blocking and preparation and stuff, in time for our show to launch the very next day after all the UK theatres had shut down. And because of that, we were very fortunate to be the first movers in the space. Just the timing. That's all it was. It was timing. So the idea was not particularly unique or revolutionary in and of itself, but it was coming at a time where people needed it. And then we were able to deliver it at a time that it caught this wave of press. So we ended up on BBC Newsnight, which is the flagship like politics and current events show in the UK. We were on that twice, which is just like, what is happening? We were in the New York Times, we were in the Guardian, we were in all these newspapers. And so it was like, this is like happening, like this is happening. And so once that had kicked off, we were like, well, we said we were going to do the first folio. That's going to take till the end of November, and it's March. so we better get organised. And so then we started to put a structure in place so that we could successfully try and deliver on this concept week in and week out and make it not necessarily sustainable as a forever thing, but as a 9-month kind of sprint. What are the mechanisms that we need in place? And so the book goes on to chart what all of those mechanisms were, the process by which we came around structuring it, because it's kind of easy to say Shakespeare reading group. That's the kind of, the sign above the door. But the actual process that we went through in order to make it more than just that, and make it into an event and make it into something that people wanted to be a part of and contribute to, and one thing and another, all of those details of what we did are shared in the book. And it all comes down to the innovation process, because myself and my wife have both worked kind of moonlighting in the innovation space. So whenever companies have new products or services, or they want to create cultural transformation within their organizations or whatever, they come to innovation consultancies to help them with the thought process of coming up with those new ideas. And because Sarah was very experienced in that world, I'd done some work within that world as a creative lead, kind of owning one small part of that whole process. We were both familiar enough with the ways in which it worked that we could apply them very quickly and readily to this situation that no one had ever seen before. So we're like, okay, if these are the factors and the variables, if this is the situation that we're facing and we've never faced it before, how do you respond to that? And then the way that we chose to respond to it was all informed by going through that process with the variables of the situation that we found ourselves in. And so when it came to writing the book, we could have written a book about Zoom theatre, but it would have been out of date by the time it was published. Like nobody's doing it anymore.
Totally.
And there'll be a new interface. People have been doing theatre in Grand Theft Auto. People have been doing theatre in Fallout 76, I think it is. So like people have already evolved beyond Zoom as a medium. But what we did have that was still going to be valuable to anyone in any situation was this innovation process that, as applied and specialised for the creation of theatre in both new and existing mediums. So that's really the core of what the book is about, is how to think differently about theatre, and how thinking differently about theatre, how it's made, how it's conceived, how it's executed, can then help you to create things that you never would have thought yourself capable of if you didn't have that process to inform you and to guide you on that path.
And also for actors, I'm guessing, is this something that they could use for like the process of preparing a character, like if an actor wanted to create their own work?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I mean, I think if someone's looking at creating their own work, absolutely. I mean, how many of us now are solely actors in terms of turning up and saying lines out loud and emoting? Like, everybody's working on their own projects. Everybody's looking to, you've got this amazing podcast. Like, everybody is out there grinding and coming up with fascinating and intelligent new ways to get themselves out there in the industry. And if you want to make yourself the project, then you can apply this innovation methodology to, okay, I am the product. How am I going to differentiate myself in this incredibly competitive marketplace and say, this is who I am to the world? And you can make that the focus of your project. So the notion with the book is, as you read, you should have a project that you're thinking about making. And then as you read through it and follow along with the processes that we undertook, you can then apply the logic of those processes to your own project, so that by the time you finish the book, you're like, oh my God, I've got a thing here that I'm really excited about making. And so that project can be anything within the theatrical and performance space. And so, if you want to make it about yourself, you want to make it about a podcast, an audio drama, a theatre piece.
And I'm guessing this is the process, because I was reading that you've been working with the Stratford Festival and other institutions in the UK about the possible like new technologies and how to apply that to theatre. Is that like what you're talking about, like the process that then you work with them about how they can apply that to their productions?
Yes and no. I think it's just about having a finger on the pulse of emerging technologies and just thinking about, well, if we can leverage Zoom to do theatre, we can leverage most things to do theatre. And there's some really exciting stuff that's coming out in the space. And I'm sad to say, ideas that I've had have now already been executed to a better standard by but by people that have more money and opportunity to execute them. So I had this idea, right? And I was like, this is going to be amazing. I'm going to do a King Lear where we tent the audience in gauze and we project the sky onto this gauze, and the whole set of the piece, it'll be in the round, and the whole set of the piece will be the sky, and it'll be like a planetarium. And so you'll be able to see all the stars when they're talking about the stars. You'll see the storm. You'll see all the vaulted ceilings and arches and stuff when they're doing the internal scenes in the castle and all this kind of thing. And it will be this agoraphobic, exposing experience that makes the actors feel tiny. And then I look at the press night photos for Kenneth Branagh's King Lear, and he's got a giant bloody disc which has projections of the sky on it, like writ large. And I was like, oh, well, cool, never mind, that's fine. Kenneth Branagh got there first. Okay, cool, that's fine. And then I had another idea. I had another idea about integrating binaural headphones into a piece, and having the idea that you could be inside the mind of the character. So surround sound external speakers are giving you the kind of atmos and the stuff that is coming from outside. But then when an actor is doing soliloquies or is having thoughts that are private, suddenly those are right in your ear, and maybe they're more in your left ear or your right ear, depending on where the actor is on stage, right? And then I look at the press release for David Tennant's Macbeth, and they're like, and this production is going to utilise binaural audio. And so I'm like, but that's because I am, at the end of the day, an independent freelance theatre maker who did a cool digital project once, but I'm not an institution and I'm not a celebrity. And while I'm not those two things, I'm never going to command the kind of engine of funding and connections and whatever else you need in order to make these big projects a reality. But the cool thing is, people are doing them, which meant that I had good ideas. Do you know what I mean?
That's what I'm about to say. I'm like,
if
don't
someone
say
else
never.
Is doing it, but if someone else is doing it,
exactly, you're on the right track.
Yeah, I'm on the right track, and hopefully I'll be there for the next one or the next one. But really, for me, the successes that I've had in that field with Stratford Festival and stuff like that was, I've looked at interactive video as a platform, and I've seen Bandersnatch on Netflix, and I wonder whether that could be used to create a choose-your-own-adventure where you go through a piece of Shakespeare's text and you discover everything just by like clicking on random stuff. So, you know, it's novel combinations of things presented in a unique way, which is, to slowly bring it round full circle, that's essentially what you're looking at with the innovation process. It's how do I take novel ideas and combine them in a unique way so that I'm creating something that hasn't existed before, really.
So many people are like, well, everything has been done, so, you know, like, I don't have to, like, try. It's like, no. Like, look, Shakespeare, right? Plays that have been done for so long, and you guys are still finding these fascinating ways to do it different, and it's working. And nowadays with technology, I don't know if any of these technologies that you're looking at include AI or any of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess AI is a really weird one, isn't it? Because it's a bit infinite monkey cage. Like, eventually it will write the complete works of Shakespeare on its own. But I've tried it with AI. I said, can you write me a Shakespearean sonnet? And it can't yet. It just can't. It was terrible.
That's scary.
It was really bad. But it's in its nascent stage. You know, it's in its embryonic form at the minute, and I'm sure it's going to go on to do all kinds of fascinating things. You know, I would love to see an AI actor. So you have AI voice tools, you have AI kind of learning programs, and so if you're doing a Frankenstein, why don't you have Frankenstein played by an AI? And actually see whether you can train an AI to perform that role, and can it have insights about that role? Because, like, being an actor is delving into your humanity. So what is an AI delving into? And that's been a big kind of one of the big ethical watchouts with it, isn't it? Is what is it delving into? It's delving into other people's copyrighted material is the short answer. But the question is, you know, how would you train an AI? And
I love how you're embracing it, because I've heard so many creative and artists that are coming from a place of fear, which I get it. It's scary. It's all new. But it's like, it's kind of unavoidable. It's here. Like, we have, you know, technology is not going anywhere. AI is not going to go anywhere. It's just only going to keep expanding. And so you can either, you know, be in fear and try to avoid it and let it eat you, or maybe include it and find a way to make what you already do better. Because in the end, it's what we do as humans, as you said, like AI can't do. And hopefully it won't be able to do. But for now, it can't. But you can find the ways in which it can enhance it in some way, or it can create these different experiences that we haven't been able to do before because it didn't exist.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's just about we need to regulate, right? We need to make sure that we're doing this in a measured and considered way. And I think that was in a large part the difficulty with social media was that it was just so explosive, and the rate of expansion was unlike anything that anybody had seen before. That regulators could not keep up with it, and so it just became this kind of crazy Wild West. Do you know Corridor Crew on YouTube? They're doing fascinating things at the minute with. So Corridor Crew are this amazing YouTube channel that specialise in visual effects, and they have been really at the forefront of looking at how they can use AI tools to create original content. So the most recent thing they did, it was an anime rock paper scissors. And it's like an anime episode, but they shot it all live action. So they shot all of the things with them as just physical people against a green screen, and then they ran that through an AI that they trained on images that they hired an artist to create. So this is what this character looks like, this is what this character looks like, etc. And then the AI took the live action and turned it into the cartoon. And while the results are not perfect, they are far beyond the capabilities that any of those people would have had to create a cartoon prior to that. So they've essentially created an all-new workflow for creating original material within an established genre, but with a totally unique and original look and feel and approach. And that still utilises an extraordinary amount of skill, talent, dedication, hard work, all the things that we feel like AI is going to kind of undermine. They've had to put all of that in to make AI do something that it wasn't designed for, but can kind of execute to a pretty good level that allows them to make a cartoon, which is something that without that they'd never have been able to do. So I think we need to get comfortable with our discomfort and think, how can we use it, and how can we provide positive role models of use cases and executions that aren't exploitative, that still take advantage of what this new tool has to offer.
Absolutely. And I think it's the easiest time ever in history to create your own art, whether you're an actor, director, writer, right, or graphic artist. And I think using this opportunity to like put your work out there like they are doing, like all these things that you wouldn't have been able to do before, like there's no excuses now. So it's a great time to be an artist, and it's a great time to like actually just do it and put it out there and make it happen, things that before
I think there's been a big change, hasn't there? And I think it's something that we all have to kind of reckon with, where we're now in a generation that lives out loud in terms of you kind of publicize your failures, you know, like your first attempt at anything is going to be terrible, but you have to do it to get to your second, third, fourth, 100th attempt that's pretty good. But you won't get to the 100th if you don't do the first, so you've just kind of got to get on and put something rubbish out to start with. And I think as everybody starts to learn that that's the way it has to work, we're going to become, I hope, in an optimistic vision of the future, much more forgiving of each other across the long term, right? Like we can look at the work that someone produced 5 years and go, oh, it's so interesting to see the seeds of what they're now doing in that, rather than being like, well, that was shit.
Totally. No, I love this new generation. Like, you know, when I was younger, when I was like a child, I started using social media. It was mostly Instagram, and Instagram is so curated and everything is perfect. And now, you know, Gen Z is like, we have TikTok, and TikTok is what you're saying. Like people are like showing their messiest sides, and nothing is curated. You're seeing crazy things there that before, you know, like 20 years ago, people wouldn't have shown, like of their private lives. And I think as a society as a whole, it is making us way more open about these conversations of, you know, we all go through these experiences. We all are going through our different messes. We're all human, and it's okay. And hopefully that does apply then to artists too.
100%. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we'd be in a better world if artists were allowed to make rubbish in order to make good stuff.
Totally. That's how you get to the good stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So before you go, because I know it's getting late in the UK, I have 3 short questions for you.
Sure.
The first one is, can you tell us 3 movies that you could watch anytime?
3 is the hard part. I have a bunch of movies. To be honest, I'm going to go lowbrow with this, because like the temptation is always as an artist to be like, well, Kurosawa's Rashomon is like so seminal, but I'm not going to do that. Like I love art house.
No.
Like I genuinely do.
Know,
but the comfort films for me are Ridley Scott historical epics.
Comfort films.
Yeah, genuinely, like Gladiator, Kingdom of Heaven extended director's cut edition, which takes some of the focus off Orlando Bloom for the better, shall we say? And even the Robin Hood with Russell Crowe, which I can watch and be like, there's so much about this that is naff, but I don't care. I'm in my happy place. like those. I think those films hit me at just a time in my life and an age where I was just like, I love history, I love escapism, I love adventure, and these films have got all of that. I'm excited for Napoleon, which is coming out soon, which seems to be like the last gasp of his to do a historical epic. We'll see. He seems pretty unstoppable. Lord of the Rings trilogy is another really safe option. I'm being very stereotypical now as a kind of stage combat nerd, Shakespeare person. I'm showing my cards here. I don't know what they
put in Gladiator, but I have this theory that all men are obsessed with Gladiator. And when you said Gladiator, I was like, of course. Like every time I ask that question, men are like, Gladiator.
Gladiator. I mean, I think it's the classic. I think it is the classic hero's journey and return and nothing else. Like, he's the reluctant hero. Yeah. He's the guy that's he's ethical and he doesn't want to take on the job that he gets offered, but then he's forced into it. And then you've got the avenging thing going on, and you know he gets to have cool fights and all the rest of it. Like he is a Mary Sue, if you look at it that way. You know, like Rey Skywalker gets slated constantly, and they're like, but Rey Skywalker's good at everything. Have you seen Gladiator? Dude can't do anything wrong. Like he's literally dying of infection, and he comes back from it, and he's like super strong and invincible in the ring. So it's a bit preposterous in that respect. Love Lord of the Rings. I can watch that all day. Lord of the Rings, best depiction of wholesome masculinity. That's one of the reasons that I can keep going back to that and not have to roll my eyes, is the fact that you've just got people like Aragorn and Sam who just care about people, just unapologetically care about people as men, and I'm like, that is the best. Like, that's what we want to be aspiring to. So I think those will be my picks.
Amazing. Love Lord of the Rings so much. Oh my gosh. Okay, the next question is, can you tell us 2 plays that you have been in that have a special place in your heart?
Oh, only 2. Yes, I can. Yes. Midsummer Night's Dream, I played Bottom on tour, and it was some of the most fun that I've ever had. It's the sweatiest I've ever been on stage. Like, I've soaked through two shirts that I'm wearing as costume, and gotten sweat rash on stage from how hard I'm working. But I gave it everything I had, and for about the rehearsal period was really weird. It was really long, so we'd do 1 day a week, but for like a year. And for like 6 months of that, I just wasn't getting anywhere, and I was like, I can't do comedy. Like, I'm a serious Shakespeare actor. I don't know what all this messing about is. And then one day something just clicked, and from there I've like gone deep in on clown and improv and just an absolute love of an appreciation for people that can do comedy, because I found it so hard to get in. But by the time I got out on stage and did it for the audience and they responded, and then that like egged me on to get more carried away, and they kind of encouraged me on that journey. I just had the absolute best time. I think I've never had more fun on stage.
The first time you get that laugh on stage, it's like, oh my god, wait, I can do this. It's so cool. Good. Yeah. It's so good. But then it becomes a dark temptation as well, you know? Like, you'll be playing a dramatic role and you're like, I could really make this funny. I know exactly what to do to get a laugh. And I can't do it. Totally.
It's not the right time. But yeah, that was absolutely wonderful. And then I'd say probably the other one, it'd probably be a Harold Pinter. And the name of it, I'm afraid, right now escapes me, but is an interviewer. And there's a silent partner on stage who you're talking to. And it starts off and it's almost like he's a used car salesman, or he's like a customer service agent or whatever. And then as it goes on and on and on, you understand that he's interrogating this guy and he's part of like a totalitarian regime. And it's all subtext. And it's all in what you're playing in between the lines or underneath the lines. And because Shakespeare is not that, there's no subtext in Shakespeare. Everyone says what they mean, and they're speaking to think is the way to think about it, right? Whereas in this, it was entirely the opposite, and it was about knowing the journey that you want the audience to go on through their experience of it, knowing all the time what's really happening, but then how do you drip feed that to the audience so that their revelation progressively unravels and they're getting little bits of information through it's only about probably 25-30 minute one act play, but it's like how do you chart the moments of this so that the audience are like, wait a second, oh no, oh
this is
no.
really cool.
And it's like a horror film, but played out just in a monologue with the guy looking at you. And I'm fairly sure it concludes. This may have been one of our subtextual choices. I'm not sure, but in our version anyway, it concluded where the reason the guy didn't talk is because he'd had his tongue chopped out already. So this whole process was about getting him to sign a confession or something of that nature, and it's so dark, but it was such a singular acting challenge in the tragedy space.
All right, and my last question for you is, can you give one piece of advice to a young actor who's just starting out?
So all I can do is speak from my own experience. I did not go to drama school,
Of course.
and because I didn't go to drama school, I had to curate my own experience. And that meant applying to as many things as possible, being in as many things as possible, some of which were not the jobs that you would aspire to do, right? But in every single opportunity that I took, getting as much from that experience as I possibly could. And from that, I remember distinctly I was on a screen acting course and they were having trouble with a boom. And I went, oh, actually, if you take that XLR cable and you tie it like this, then when it pulls, it won't pull the two bits of the XLR cable out. It'll just tighten the knot, and then it won't F up. And the DOP looked at me and he was like, where'd you find that out? I was like, just being on set when there was two people, when there was a DOP and a sound guy and me, and we all had to muck in. And you get a better understanding of how everybody's job works so that you can have far more respect for what they're doing, and you can be helpful to them as a performer by doing those small scale things. But just be purposeful about the kind of work that you're trying to get and challenge yourself with it. Because that's how I essentially synthesized my own drama school experience, was through very deliberately picking projects or targeting those kinds of projects until I got one, is a more realistic way of putting it, to say I want to do something like this because it's going to give me that, and that's something that I need that I don't have currently. And I guess the only other thing that I would say is I like to joke that I'm offer only as an actor. Because I don't get much work as an actor, because I'm hustling, doing the Shakespeare, doing directing, doing stage combat, fight directing, teaching, working in universities and drama schools, all the rest of it. So I still love acting. I still want to be doing acting as much as I can, but I'm not doing as much of it. I've got a 2.5-year-old now. I've got a baby. So I'm not going to be going out on tour where I'm away from home for 6 months. I'm just not. So that reduces the kind of jobs that I can get. So if you want to be an artist, if you want to be a creative, to make it more broad, expand that skills tree, and then if your circumstances change, you can push more into one avenue or the other because you've got those avenues available. But if all you ever do is go, I'm going to sit there waiting for the phone to ring, or I'm just going to grind on being a screen actor and that's it, and if you narrow yourself too much, it's kind of the opposite of Arnie's advice, right? Arnie was like, no, don't have a plan B. And I'm like, no, don't have a plan B. Have like a plan A through X and try to do them all and see which one.
But it can be all in art.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. There's so many different opportunities for ways to express yourself creatively that I don't feel like any creative now needs to be limited to purely one avenue. And I think if you do that to yourself, you do a disservice, because there's so much out there to discover that you might love that you won't know that you love if you haven't tried it. So just try and do as much as you can.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing up again, I wanted to talk about that you did not go to acting school. This is a comment that I get so often. There's a lot of young listeners, and, the parents might not support them, and they're like, I don't have the money to go to acting school, and they're like, can I be an actor? Is that possible? And you are one of those examples that is very inspiring, because you didn't have to, and you've learned so much, and look at everything that you're doing now. So thank you for bringing that up. I'm sure it's going to help them a lot.
Yeah, no, the pithiest way to put it is that I've never been to drama schools and I teach at them now. So it's not...
There you go.
It's not the be all and the end all. It's not the only way in, and it's not the only way up. Does it facilitate your access?
Sure.
Absolutely. but can it be done without that? Also, absolutely.
Well, Rob, before you go, can you tell us where people can find you and work with you and pre-order your book or find it when it comes out?
Absolutely, yeah. So the book is Innovation and Digital Theatre. It's been published by Routledge, which is an imprint of Taylor and Francis. So you can just type any of that into Google and it should come up. You can also get 20% off, very excitingly, with the discount code, which I definitely have in front of me. Here it is. It's SMA40. So if you type in SMA40 at checkout, you can get 20% off your order. If you order now, you might get some kind of pre-order discount as well. I'm not sure. I don't know whether those compound, but try it and find out. So that's available.
Yeah, I'll put it on the show notes so everybody has it.
Nice, fabulous, thank you. So you can do that. You can buy the Shakespeare deck at my website, robmiles.co.uk, where you can also find out more about the Shakespeare courses that I run and the Shakespeare one-to-one coaching that I offer. So if you have an audition that you're looking for a Shakespeare director that's done all the plays to tell you how you could get more out of the speech that you're trying to do, for whether it's for drama school or for an audition or whatever, then I'm always happy to help people out with that. You can find me at stagefightscotland.com. I am Scotland's only resident certified teacher of stage combat with the British Academy of Stage and Screen Combat.
Yes.
I'm running a swashbuckling course in about 2 weeks' time, which I'm very excited about. And listen, there's one place left, so go to stagefightscotland.com if you're listening from Scotland now and book that final place and come and join us. We've got 9 people. It would be great to have 10 so that one person doesn't have to go twice. And swashbuckling is like one of the most fun weapons you can do. It's so ridiculous in the best way. It's like a wonderfully arch over the top 1930s or Pirates of the Caribbean Jack Sparrow kind of vibe. So if that sounds like a good time to you to come and do that for a week and get a marketable accredited skill in the process, then do come along to that. I'm directing a 4-person...
You don't have to tell me twice. I might come to Scotland.
Just fly over, mate. Absolutely. Yeah. Come on over. You're always welcome, Denise. You're always welcome. Thank you. Then I'm directing a 4-person adaptation of Macbeth called To Be Thus with the Royal Conservatoire Scotland's MFA acting cohort at the minute. So that's going up in January next year. I'm trying to think if there's anything I missed. The Owning Shakespeare podcast is available wherever good podcasts can be downloaded, which is a series of discussions, really, with different veteran Shakespeare actors talking about their unique process and approach to breaking down a speech for the first time and starting to perform it. Where instead of getting if you want to get my expertise on it, get the Shakespeare deck. If you want to get the big time actors' expertise on it, go to Owning Shakespeare and listen to what they've got to say. And there's loads of lovely, useful insights that you can take from that. I think that's everything. I'm on Instagram at Robert Myles.
A lot.
Twitter at Rob Myles. Yeah, I'm one of those hummingbird kind of people. There's like a flower over there and a flower over there. And I'm going to go to all of them.
Yeah, that's amazing. You're on social media too, so everybody go follow Rob on social media. And thank you for being with us today and sharing your awesome knowledge with us.
Thanks so much, mate. I know it's been a long time coming, but I really appreciate you getting me involved. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Of course, it's been great having you. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks so much, mate.
I hope you guys enjoyed the interview with Rob as much as I did. He was so much fun and he gave so much incredible advice. I hope you guys get to work with him because when I did in the summer, he was an amazing teacher, not just for stage combat, but also an acting teacher. He came and saw our stage combat choreographies that we had been working on for 2 weeks, and he made them so much better in just 5 minutes and a few notes that he gave us. So thank you, Rob, again for coming to the Actors Wow podcast. We wish you the best and success in all the things that you do. Before we end the episode today, I did want to bring the movie of the week. This week, we are going to talk about Beau is Afraid, the latest Ari Aster movie that for some reason has gone with the wind. I love Ari Aster. If you don't know who Ari Aster is, he's also the director and writer of Hereditary and Midsommar. Those are also incredible horror movies. And his latest movie, Beau is Afraid, with Joaquin Phoenix, came out a few months ago. Actually, I think it came out in the summer. I think it was June. I loved it. And I think it's one of those movies that people who say they didn't like it is because they did not get it. It has a 67% on Rotten Tomatoes, which I don't understand. I think it's one of those deep psychological movies, which is what Ari Aster does. And of course, Joaquin Phoenix is in it, so his performance in it is Academy Award worthy. I definitely recommend it. I think it's one of those movies that it's not commercial, it's not for everybody, but if you are into more of a dark psychological thriller drama with lots of layers and lots of conspiracy theories and things that you can talk about and dissect with friends when you watch it, I am sure you will love this movie as much as I did. Thanks again for joining me one more week on the Actors Wow podcast. Next week, we're going to have a solo cast, so I'll see you next Wednesday.